Okay, our next project is going to be to do some PHP scripting on a web server. We're going to use what's called a LAMP stack, and I'll explain that in just a second. But PHP is a scripting language that's very useful for connecting a web page to a database or doing some server-side scripting. If you've ever seen a web page or make one, they're fairly static when you do an HTML page. You can make it look cool with CSS. And then there's another scripting language called JavaScript, which is used on the front end. That's more for the user's experience. What you see, it can also connect to a server to refresh content without you having to refresh your page. And it's also used for rollover buttons, things like that. But what we're doing is going to be back-end programming. And we need a server or a testing server, which is what we're going to set up on our local computer in order to do this. Now the LAMP stack L stands for Linux, the A stands for the Apache Web Server, which is a general web server that we're going to be using. MySQL, disregard that, but we're going to install it all at once. And then PHP, our scripting language, and there's also some administrative tools with that. So LAMP, why we're using it? Well, it's very popular and free. It'll set us up with a local testing environment. So what we do won't be live on the internet. It'll just have our laptops mimicking a web server. There's also several versions. There's WAMP for Windows. You can also use IIS, which is Internet Information Servers, for a testing server. There's MAMP for Mac, and XAMPP with an X, I think, can be used with Windows. Or it's so cheap now, you can actually just buy web hosting. Now Apache, the server we're using, is probably the most common one out there. This stat I found 64% in 2012. Another one that we might use is Nginx, but that's only if you get into this sort of thing because it's very high performance, but it won't have as many features as Apache. All right, so see the tutorial video to get the LAMP installed. That'll be on a link below this video. Once you have that installed, we have to test and see if it works. So you're going to open up a web browser and type in http://localhost. You should see a welcome message or something about Apache. And it's going to start every time you boot, so we don't have to worry about starting this or turning it off. It just runs in the background for us. And then we're going to test it with our own web page. And all the web pages we do are we open up your file system in Linux and Ubuntu and go to the var folder and then www for World Wide Web. That's where we'll be storing our files. So we're going to add a simple PHP page to the folder and then test it. If it doesn't work, we're going to have to change ownership, or you might not be able to add your web page to that var folder. So if that's the case, what you want to do is go to the terminal and type sudo chown, which stands for change ownership, to -r, and then use your username or whatever you log in with. And then you'll need space /var/www. That'll give you, I think, read, write, and all that sort of thing, give you ownership for that folder. So let's show you what a web page might look like. I'll come back to that one. Here's a sample of a form, HTML form, .html, where we have these sort of these two form fields and then a button. I'm going to view the page source, so you can type this out in Notepad or TextPad and then save it as a .html. Actually, I'll copy this. This is short enough that you can copy it. But the way this works, that tells especially if this line is just for Internet Explorer, which is always a pain to use, saying that it's an HTML document. And we have HTML tags, a body tag, and notice for every opening one we have a \1 which closes it. Then we have our form. The action is going to be to welcome.php. I'll show you that code in a second. And then we're going to have the name. This is the code for our input box. This just is the equivalent of hitting enter. Then we have our email form, and then our button is going to be a submit button. That's what it should have looked like. Submit query. So let's see if that's listed anywhere. That must be the default. Okay, and then your to welcome page is going to look like this. HTML, body, \body and all that. We just have some text. And this is how we know we're using PHP. It's #, well, first the bracket, the greater than, question mark, then PHP, and it closes with a question mark. So everything in here is PHP statement. Now when you save this to welcome, remember you have to save it as .php file. Otherwise it's going to think it's just a web page. And what this is going to do, it's going to take the information we enter in here. When we submit the query, it is going to then display that. So it's going to say our name is whatever we typed in, username, and our email is whatever we typed in for email. So we're going to have to put those in our var/www folder to get those working. And just to see if these naming conventions, how those work, those variable names come from this page. So we name those fields username and email. So that's sort of the variable name for those strings that we're going to be capturing. So once again, after you've coded those two, move them to your var/www folder. And then to run it, we're going to have to type in localhost / whatever your form name was .html. And then when you hit submit, it'll automatically run the PHP page. And the PHP needs a server. So if you don't get the answer you're looking for, that means it's not working properly. So, also, you can check out the PHP admin site, localhost / PHP myadmin, and you'll probably end up choosing a username. A good username is the default one, which is root. That's also commonly used in Linux. And you can set a password. You probably chose one during install if you haven't yet. A common one is to spell root backward, which is TOOR. So we'll be using PHP myadmin a little bit later on our project. And we're going to do some really powerful stuff. Hopefully we don't run out of time. But what we're going to do is create a database using MySQL, which will reside on our web server. And then we're going to create a dynamic web page, meaning a PHP page, that we can use to populate the database, meaning we can put things in a form, hit submit, and it will be stored in that database, and then use PHP to read from that database and HTML to format it. So on a much larger scale, that's something that, say, eBay or Amazon.com is doing, or Facebook with their logins. They have to, at some point, put all the information they have, all the products for sale, into a database, and then be able to retrieve that, say, based on if you're searching for shoes or something, to be able to retrieve that from a database and then format it so it looks good on their webpage. We're going to do a very, very, very minimal scaled down version of that. But it's something that's very powerful, very accessible, and very useful, especially if you're going to have some college projects that you want to be interactive.